Hot coffee splashed across Tanya's white uniform, and the rich teens howled with laughter. But as their phones filmed her humiliation, two silent strangers in the corner took notes. Seconds later, their pens froze and Tanya's quiet "Excuse me, ma'am," turned the entire diner into a ticking bomb. It's a crisp afternoon at the Sapphire table. Sunlight streams through the large windows, painting the red booths in a soft glow. Tanya Solomon glides between tables with a gleaming coffee pot, her spotless white uniform a shield against the weariness of a double shift. Her gentle smile conceals the strain of long hours spent supporting her younger sister's college dreams. The diner hums with warmth, filled with the chatter of regulars who adore her and the quiet respect of her coworkers. In a corner booth, two strangers in plain clothes, Michelin inspectors, scribble notes, their watchful eyes unnoticed. The door bursts open, and Sandra Anderson, Suzanne Shannon, Fran Singleton, and Robin Skinner sweep in, glamorous, loud, and brimming with entitlement. Sandra's smirk lands on Tanya, her gaze sharp with intent. The stage is set. If you believe in kindness and dignity, hit subscribe, because this story is going to prove why it matters. This moment hung in the air, a prelude to the storm brewing within the diner's walls. As Sandra and her friends claimed their window booth, the inspectors' pens paused, their focus shifting from the menu to the unfolding drama, ready to document the consequences of what was to come. Sandra slid into the window booth with a flourish, her bright pink dress catching the sunlight like a beacon against the diner's warm, muted tones. Suzanne followed in a vivid yellow, while Fran and Robin flanked her in teal and lime green, their laughter ringing out like a discordant chime. The quartet settled in, their designer bags clashing with the worn vinyl seats, a vivid tableau of privilege amid the homely charm of the Sapphire table. The regulars exchanged uneasy glances, their murmurs fading as the air thickened with an unspoken tension. The mockery began subtly, a calculated undercurrent beneath. Tanya turned slowly, her movements deliberate as she set the coffee pot down on a nearby table, her hands steadying as she faced the weight of the moment. The stain on her uniform seemed to pulse with the diner's collective heartbeat, a symbol of the indignity thrust upon her. Yet her silence spoke louder than any protest, a quiet strength that rooted her to the spot. Sandra, oblivious to the shift, scrolled through her phone, replaying the video with a triumphant chuckle, her friends egging her on with whispered encouragement. "Post it, let everyone see," Suzanne urged, her voice a hiss of excitement. The regulars shifted uncomfortably, their admiration for Tanya deepening into a protective resolve. An older man at the counter clenched his fist, while a woman near the door murmured to her companion, her eyes locked on the scene. The kitchen staff exchanged tense looks, the manager hovering near the pass-through, his jaw tight. But Tanya remained the still center, her dignity a beacon amid the storm. She adjusted her apron, the wet fabric clinging to her, and met Sandra's gaze with a calm that belied the fire in her chest. "I'll get you a fresh pot," she said, her tone even, though her hands betrayed a slight tremor as she turned away. Sandra leaned back, her laughter resuming as she waved a dismissive hand. "Hurry up, Tanya, don't keep us waiting," she called, the mispronunciation a fresh barb. Her friends snickered, their voices blending into a symphony of arrogance that filled the diner. The inspectors' pens didn't stop, their notes growing more detailed, capturing the escalation of Sandra's cruelty and the diner's reaction. One inspector tilted his head, his expression unreadable, while the other jotted a phrase, "Dignity under fire," before underlining it twice. The silence that followed Tanya's retreat was heavy, a palpable force that pressed against the walls. The jukebox remained silent, its usual cheer absent, as if mourning the moment. The regulars' eyes followed Tanya as she moved toward the kitchen, her back straight despite the weight of the stain and the laughter trailing her. The kitchen door swung shut behind her, muffling the teens' voices, but the tension lingered, a coiled spring ready to release. The inspectors leaned closer, their whispers lost in the hum of the diner's stillness, their role as silent judges becoming ever more critical. Outside, the afternoon sun continued its arc, casting long shadows through the windows, oblivious to the drama within. The diner felt smaller, the space between the booths and tables shrinking under the weight of the incident. Tanya reappeared moments later, a fresh coffee pot in hand, her expression composed but her eyes carrying a flicker of resolve. She approached the booth with the same grace, pouring the coffee with a steady hand, though the stain on her uniform remained a silent testament to the earlier assault. Sandra's smirk widened as she accepted the cup, taking a deliberate sip before setting it down with a clatter. "Better," she said, her tone laced with condescension. "But you might want to change. That look doesn't suit you." Her friends erupted again, their laughter a jagged edge against Tanya's silence. The inspectors' pens moved faster, their notebooks filling with observations, the weight of their judgment growing with each scribbled line. The diner held its breath, the moment stretching into an eternity as Tanya stood tall, her whisper of "Excuse me, ma'am," echoing in the minds of all who witnessed it. The scene played out like a tableau, frozen in time. The bright dresses of the teens, the stained uniform of Tanya, the watchful eyes of the inspectors, and the stunned faces of the regulars. The spill had been more than an accident. It was a declaration, a challenge to the dignity Tanya embodied. And in that silence, her power grew, a quiet force that promised the storm was far from over. Subscribe if you believe silence can be powerful when faced with cruelty. The diner's stillness hung heavy, the echo of Tanya's whispered, "Excuse me, ma'am," lingering like a faint chime amid the tension. The brown stain on her uniform seemed to pulse with the room's collective heartbeat, a silent testament to the cruelty that had unfolded. As Tanya turned back toward the kitchen, her steps measured despite the tremor in her hands, the atmosphere shifted. The kitchen door swung open, and the manager, a stout man with a furrowed brow, stepped forward, his apron still dusted with flour. Behind him, the chef emerged, his broad frame filling the doorway, a spatula gripped tightly as if it were a weapon. The tension thickened, a palpable force that pressed against the walls of the sapphire table. The regulars exchanged concerned looks, their faces etched with a mix of shock and resolve. An older woman near the counter clutched her coffee cup, her knuckles whitening, while a man in a trucker's cap shifted in his seat, his eyes narrowing toward Sandra's booth. Whispers rippled through the room, a low hum of disapproval that grew with each passing second. The kitchen staff lingered at the pass-through, their movements stilled, their gazes locked on the scene unfolding before them. The air crackled with an unspoken alliance, the diner's heart aligning behind Tanya's quiet strength. Sandra leaned back in the booth, her bright pink dress catching the fading afternoon light. She tossed her hair with a confident flick, her smirk unwavering as she scrolled through her phone, replaying the video of Tanya's humiliation. Her friends mirrored her ease, Suzanne adjusting her yellow dress with a giggle, while Fran and Robin exchanged smug glances. To Sandra, the silence was irrelevant. Her money, her status, her father's name were shields she believed impenetrable. She waved a dismissive hand toward the kitchen staff, her voice cutting through the tension. "What's the holdup? Get us some service already," she called, her tone laced with entitlement, oblivious to the storm brewing around her. Tanya paused near the counter, her back to the booth, the fresh coffee pot still warm in her hands. Fury simmered beneath her composed exterior, a fire she could feel rising in her chest, but she chose dignity over retaliation. She drew a steadying breath, her shoulders squaring as she turned to face the room. Her quiet strength began to shift the power dynamics, a subtle current that rippled through the diner. The regulars' eyes softened with admiration, the kitchen staff nodded imperceptibly, and even the manager's stern expression eased into something akin to pride. Tanya's silence was not weakness, it was a fortress, and its walls were growing taller with each passing moment. At the corner booth, the Michelin inspectors observed with keen interest. Their pens had slowed, but their focus remained razor-sharp. One inspector, a man with wire-rimmed glasses, tilted his head toward the other, a woman with a sharp gaze, and gave a discreet nod. Their hands moved beneath the table, a silent signal passing between them as they rose from their seats. The manager caught the gesture, his eyes narrowing as he stepped away from the kitchen staff to meet them. The inspectors' voices were low, their words lost in the hum of the diner's tension, but their intent was clear. They needed a private word, and it carried the weight of judgment. Sandra, still engrossed in her phone, laughed at a comment from Suzanne, her confidence unshaken. "They wouldn't dare do anything," she muttered, her voice a mix of amusement and arrogance. Her friends nodded, their bright dresses a stark contrast to the diner's warm tones, their belief in their invincibility unwavering. The kitchen staff exchanged glances, the chef's grip tightening on his spatula, while the manager returned from the inspectors, his expression unreadable. He moved toward Sandra's booth, his steps deliberate, but she paid him no mind, too caught up in her bubble of privilege to notice the shift. Tanya set the coffee pot down on the counter, her hands steady now, her dignity a beacon amid the chaos. She met the manager's gaze briefly, a silent understanding passing between them, before turning back to her tasks. The regulars' murmurs grew softer, their concern morphing into a quiet solidarity. The kitchen staff retreated slightly, their tension easing as they watched the manager approach the booth. The inspectors resumed their seats, their notebooks open, their pens poised as if awaiting the next act in this unfolding drama. Sandra leaned forward, her smirk widening as she addressed the manager. Finally decided to show up? Tell your little waitress to hurry up, she's wasting our time. Her friends chuckled, their laughter a jagged edge against the diner's stillness. The manager's jaw tightened, but his voice remained calm, a steady anchor in the rising tide. This is a place of respect, he said, his words measured. And today you've crossed a line. The statement hung in the air, a warning that Sandra dismissed with a roll of her eyes. The room seemed to hold its breath again, the jukebox silent, the sunlight casting long shadows through the windows. The inspector's eyes flicked between the manager and Sandra, their notes growing with each exchange. Tanya remained at the counter, her back straight, her presence a quiet force that steadied the diner. The kitchen staff watched, their support palpable, while the regulars' gazes hardened, their loyalty to Tanya unwavering. Yet Sandra, lost in her overconfidence, had no inkling of the forces aligning against her. No sense of the hidden eyes that had witnessed everything, the Michelin inspectors whose judgment could reshape the diner's fate. The moment stretched, a cliffhanger etched in the tension. Sandra had no idea who just watched everything. The diner's tension hung thick, a palpable thread woven through the stillness as the manager stood poised near Sandra's booth. His words, "This is a place of respect. And today you crossed a line," lingering in the air like a quiet thunderclap. The sunlight filtering through the large windows cast long shadows across the red booths, illuminating the stark contrast between Tanya's stained uniform and the bright, carefree dresses of Sandra and her friends. The regulars watched with bated breath, their loyalty to Tanya a silent current, while the kitchen staff hovered near the pass-through, their support a steady undercurrent. At the corner booth, the Michelin inspectors rose once more, their movements deliberate as they signaled the manager for a private word, their presence a hidden fulcrum in the unfolding drama. The manager stepped away from the booth, his expression a mask of resolve as he joined the inspectors near the kitchen entrance. The man with wire-rimmed glasses leaned in, his voice low but firm, revealing their identity with a quiet authority. "We're Michelin inspectors," he said, his words carrying the weight of an unseen gavel. "We've been evaluating this establishment, but what we've witnessed today goes beyond the menu. The way this diner responds to this incident will determine its fate, whether it earns a star or faces consequences." The woman beside him nodded, her sharp gaze unwavering as she flipped open her notebook, the pages filled with meticulous notes. "We've documented everything. The spill, the mockery, the waitress's dignity. It's all part of the story now." The manager's eyes widened slightly, the gravity of their words sinking in, but he nodded, his jaw tightening with determination. The inspectors retreated to their booth, their pens resuming their dance across the pages, their role as silent judges now undeniable. Back in the dining area, Sandra remained oblivious to the storm brewing. She lounged in the window booth, her pink dress a vivid splash against the warm tones of the sapphire table. With a dismissive laugh, she tossed her hair and quipped to her friends, "What are they going to do? Take away the ketchup." Her voice dripped with sarcasm, and Suzanne giggled, adjusting her yellow dress as Fran and Robin joined in with smug chuckles. To Sandra, the manager's earlier words were a mere annoyance, a fleeting challenge to her unshakable belief in her privilege. She scrolled through her phone, replaying the video of Tanya's humiliation, her smirk widening as she muttered, "This is gold, wait till everyone sees it." Her friends nodded eagerly, their confidence a bubble that floated above the growing tension. The manager returned from the inspectors, his steps measured as he approached Sandra's table. The kitchen staff watched from the sidelines, their hands stilled over steaming pots, while the regulars exchanged glances, their concern deepening into a quiet resolve. Tanya stood near the counter, the fresh coffee pot in her hands, her stained uniform a silent testament to her endurance. Her eyes met the manager's briefly, a flicker of understanding passing between them, before she turned to wipe down a nearby table, her dignity a steady anchor amid the chaos. The inspector with the wire-rimmed glasses observed from the corner, his pen pausing as he noted the manager's approach, the woman beside him tilting her head in anticipation. The manager stopped at the edge of the booth, his voice calm but firm, cutting through the teens' laughter like a blade. "This is a place of respect," he said, his tone steady despite the undercurrent of steel. "And today you crossed a line." The words hung in the air, a declaration that silenced the booth for a heartbeat. Sandra's smirk faltered, her phone slipping slightly in her hand as she registered the confrontation. She was briefly stunned, her overconfidence shaken by the unexpected challenge. She wasn't used to being confronted. Her world had always bent to her will, her money and status a shield against accountability. Her friends froze, their giggles dying mid-breath, their bright dresses suddenly seeming out of place against the diner's somber mood. Sandra recovered quickly, her smirk returning as she leaned forward, her voice laced with defiance. "Respect? For who, her?" She jerked her head toward Tanya, her tone dripping with disdain. "She's just a waitress. What's she going to do about it?" Her friends nodded, their laughter resuming, but it lacked its earlier vigor, a hollow echo against the manager's resolve. The regulars shifted uncomfortably, their murmurs growing into a low hum of disapproval, while the kitchen staff exchanged tense looks, the chef's grip tightening on his spatula. Tanya remained at the counter, her back straight, her silence a powerful counterpoint to Sandra's noise. The manager didn't flinch. "This isn't about what she does," he said, his voice low but unyielding. "It's about what this place stands for. And you've tested that today." His gaze held Sandra's, a quiet challenge that made her shift in her seat. The inspector's pens scratched furiously, their notes capturing the exchange, the man with the glasses underlining a phrase, line crossed, with deliberate precision. The woman beside him jotted a detail about the manager's stance, her expression unreadable but focused. The diner seemed to hold its breath, the jukebox silent, the sunlight casting long shadows that stretched across the floor. Tanya moved to refill a regular's coffee, her hands steady despite the stain on her uniform, her quiet strength radiating through the room. The older woman at the counter smiled faintly, a gesture of solidarity, while the trucker in the cap nodded approvingly. The kitchen staff resumed their tasks, their movements slower now, their support for Tanya palpable. Sandra, sensing the shift, leaned back with a scoff, her confidence wavering but not yet broken. "You're all overreacting," she said, her voice rising slightly. "It's just a little spill. Get over it." Her friends murmured agreement, but their eyes darted nervously, the bubble of privilege beginning to crack. The manager stepped closer, his presence a quiet force. "It's not just a spill," he said, his tone firm. "It's about respect, and you've shown none." The words struck Sandra like a physical blow, her smirk fading as she realized the gravity of the moment. Her friends fell silent, their bright dresses a stark contrast to the somber mood, their usual bravado deserting them. The inspectors exchanged a glance, their notebooks filling with observations, the weight of their judgment growing with each passing second. Tanya glanced over her shoulder, her expression composed but her eyes carrying a flicker of resolve, her dignity a beacon amid the storm. Outside, the afternoon sun dipped lower, the shadows lengthening through the windows, casting the diner in a golden hue that belied the tension within. The regulars' murmurs grew softer, their loyalty to Tanya unwavering, while the kitchen staff watched the manager with quiet approval. Sandra, still clutching her phone, forced a laugh, but it rang hollow. "Fine," she said, her voice tight. "Do what you want, I'm not scared." But the tremble in her hands betrayed her, a crack in her armor that the manager noted with a slight nod. The inspectors remained at their booth, their pens poised, their role as silent arbiters now undeniable. The manager stepped back, his gaze lingering on Sandra before turning to Tanya, a silent acknowledgement of her strength. The diner held its breath, the moment stretching into an eternity, the storm brewing beneath the surface ready to break. Sandra had no idea of the power aligning against her. The Michelin Inspectors badges a hidden force that could reshape her world. Subscribe if you've ever seen arrogance meet its match. The diner's tension lingered like a heavy fog, the manager's words. "It's about respect, and you've shown none." fading into the soft hum of the evening as the clock ticked toward 8:52 p.m. West Africa time on Monday, October 20th, 2025. The golden dusk filtering through the large windows of the sapphire table cast long shadows across the red booths, where Sandra lounged in her bright pink dress, her forced laugh a brittle shield against the growing unease. Her friends' vibrant outfits, Suzanne in yellow, Fran in teal, and Robin in lime green, seemed to dim under the weight of the moment, while Tanya stood near the counter, her stained uniform a silent emblem of her endurance. The regulars watched with quiet solidarity, their murmurs a low tide of support, and the Michelin inspectors, their pens poised at the corner booth, observed with unreadable expressions, their notebooks brimming with the day's unfolding drama. As the diner emptied, a bystander, a young man in a faded jacket who'd been nursing a coffee near the door, slipped into the night. His phone trembled in his hand as he uploaded the video he'd captured. Sandra's mocking laughter, the deliberate spill, Tanya's whispered, "Excuse me, ma'am." Within hours, the clip erupted online, spreading like wildfire across social media platforms. By midnight, it had amassed thousands of views, then millions, shared by outraged viewers from Lagos to London. Comments poured in, "Shameful. That waitress deserves better." The outrage swelling with each retweet and hashtag. Hashtag Sapphire Table Justice trended globally, thrusting the humble diner into a digital spotlight, the world now a witness to the incident that had shaken its walls. At the corner booth, the Michelin inspectors exchanged a final solemn glance as they finalized their official notes. The man with wire-rimmed glasses closed his notebook with a soft, deliberate snap, his voice a low murmur to his companion. "It's all here, the mockery, the spill, her dignity," he said, his tone carrying the weight of a verdict. The woman beside him nodded, her sharp gaze lingering on the now empty booth where Sandra had reigned. They documented the manager's confrontation, Tanya's poise, and the diner's collective response, their words a meticulous record that would shape the establishment's future. The leather portfolio holding their notes rested on the table, a sealed promise of judgment, as they prepared to depart, leaving the diner to grapple with the consequences. Tanya, still shaken, clocked out as the last customers trickled away. The stain on her uniform felt heavier with each step as she stepped into the cool night air, the weight of the day pressing against her chest. Her mind churned, a storm of doubt swirling within. Had her silence been strength, or had it been a quiet surrender to Sandra's cruelty? The walk home was a blur, the streets of her neighborhood quiet under the moonless sky, until she pushed open the door to her small apartment. Her younger sister, Mia, looked up from her textbooks, her eyes widening at the sight of the stain. "Tanya, what happened?" she asked, rushing over with concern etched on her face. Tanya sank onto the couch, her voice trembling as she recounted the incident. The spill, the laughter, her restrained response. Mia knelt beside her, her hand warm on Tanya's arm. "Dignity doesn't need to shout to be heard," she said softly, her words a gentle anchor. "You stood tall, that's what matters." The encouragement steadied Tanya, a flicker of resolve rekindling in her chest as she nodded, the doubt easing into a quiet determination. Back at the diner, Sandra remained ensconced in her booth long after the manager's departure. Her phone buzzing incessantly with notifications she scrolled through with a casual flick. Her friends, however, began to unravel as the online backlash grew. Suzanne clutched her yellow dress, her voice a nervous whisper. "Sandra, people are calling us monsters. Look at the comments." Fran scrolled frantically, her teal dress rustling as she muttered, "My parents are going to kill me if this gets worse." Robin's lime green outfit seemed to pale as she read aloud, "They're tagging our school, our names are everywhere." The tide of outrage, tweets, posts, and viral threads, threatened to engulf them, the video's view count climbing past 10 million, drawing eyes from every corner of the globe. But Sandra doubled down. She leaned back with a scoff, her smirk intact. "Let them talk," she said, her voice laced with defiance. "My dad will handle it. I'm untouchable." Her confidence held firm, a bubble of privilege that refused to burst, even as her friend's unease deepened into panic. Behind the scenes, the restaurant buzzed with quiet preparation for a Michelin review meeting. The manager gathered the kitchen staff in the back room, his voice low but urgent as the clock neared 10 p.m. "They're serious," he said, glancing toward the inspector's abandoned booth. "This isn't just about the food anymore, it's about how we handle this." The chef nodded, his spatula resting on the counter as he outlined a plan to highlight the diner's culture, not just its cuisine. The waitstaff, including a still resilient Tanya who'd returned briefly via phone call, were summoned for a late-night briefing, their roles in the upcoming review emphasized. The inspector's notes, now sealed in the leather portfolio, sat on the manager's desk, a silent promise of judgment. The kitchen hummed with activity. Pots clanged softly, recipes were refined, as the team rallied to prove the sapphire table's worth. The incident with Sandra had become a crucible, a test that could forge a Michelin star or shatter their reputation entirely. Outside, the night deepened, the diner's windows glowing like warm beacons against the dark streets. The online storm raged on, the video's impact reverberating through social media, sparking debates and calls for accountability. Tanya, back home, sat with Mia, her sister's words echoing as she traced the stain on her uniform, a resolve hardening within her. At the diner, Sandra laughed off her friend's worries, her untouchability a fragile illusion. And within the kitchen, the staff worked with a renewed purpose, the Michelin review meeting looming like a horizon they were determined to reach. The world was watching, and the sapphire table stood at a crossroads, its fate teetering on the edge of dignity and consequence. The night deepened outside the sapphire table, the clock ticking past 9:15 p.m. West Africa time on Monday, October 20th, 2025, as the diner's windows glowed warmly against the dark streets. The air inside still carried the weight of the day's tension, the manager's earlier words. "It's about respect, and you've shown none," lingering like a faint echo. Tanya's stained uniform hung in her mind as she rested at home, bolstered by Mia's encouragement, while the online storm surrounding Sandra's mockery continued to rage, its reach now global. Inside the diner, the kitchen staff moved with quiet purpose, preparing for the Michelin review meeting, their resolve a steady current beneath the surface. The world was watching, and the fate of the humble establishment teetered on the edge of a transformative moment. The internal meeting convened in the back room, the space dimly lit by a single overhead bulb. The manager stood at the head of a worn wooden table, the Michelin inspectors seated before him, their leather portfolio resting between them. The man with wire-rimmed glasses cleared his throat, his voice steady as he addressed the gathered staff. "We've reached our decision," he began, his gaze sweeping the room. "This establishment's fate hinges not only on its cuisine but on its culture. And today, we witnessed something extraordinary." The woman beside him nodded, her sharp eyes softening as she continued. "Tanya Solomon's dignity under pressure has been noted. Her response to adversity reflects a strength that elevates this diner beyond mere food. As a result, the sapphire table is being considered for its first Michelin star, a recognition of both quality and character." A murmur of awe rippled through the staff, the chef's broad face breaking into a rare smile, while the manager exhaled, relief and pride mingling in his stance. Tanya's quiet resilience had become the cornerstone of their potential triumph. Meanwhile, the digital storm had turned into a tempest for Sandra and her friends. The video, now viewed over 15 million times, had sparked an avalanche of public criticism. Social media platforms buzzed with outrage, hashtags like #JusticeForTanya and #SapphireTable trending relentlessly. Comments flooded in from every corner. "Entitled brats. Boycott their families." The backlash of a tidal wave that threatened to drown their reputations. Suzanne's phone buzzed incessantly with messages from her panicked parents. Fran's family issued a public statement distancing themselves, and Robin's school threatened disciplinary action. Sandra's friends huddled in the booth, their bright dresses now symbols of shame, their earlier confidence shattered. But Sandra, still clinging to her illusion of invincibility, scrolled through the vitriol with a scoff. "It's just noise," she muttered, though her hands trembled slightly. Her father, a wealthy businessman, intervened at last, his stern voice cutting through her defiance over a late-night call. "This has gone too far. Fix it, or I will," he warned, the weight of familial pressure finally cracking her bubble of untouchability. Behind the scenes, a formal apology and restitution offer took shape. The manager, guided by the inspector's counsel, coordinated with Sandra's family, who sought to mitigate the damage. A lawyer arrived at the diner just before midnight, presenting a document to the manager. The offer included a public apology, a substantial financial restitution, and a proposal for restorative justice. Sandra and her friends working at the diner to learn humility. The manager relayed the options to Tanya via a discreet phone call, his voice gentle as he outlined her choices: a public apology to restore her honor, a lawsuit to seek justice, or restorative justice to teach a lesson. Tanya, now back home with Mia, listened in silence, the stain on her uniform a tangible reminder of the day. She weighed the paths, her sister's earlier words, "Dignity doesn't need to shout to be heard," resonating deeply. After a long pause, she spoke, her voice steady. "I choose the path of dignity, restorative justice. Let them learn what I live every day." The decision rippled back to the diner, where the manager nodded approvingly, relaying it to the inspectors. The man with the glasses made a final note, a satisfied glint in his eye, while the woman smiled faintly, impressed by Tanya's grace. The kitchen staff, overhearing the outcome, exchanged relieved glances, their late-night efforts validated. Outside, the online fury began to shift, some posts praising Tanya's choice as a model of strength, though the criticism of Sandra and her friends persisted. Sandra, informed of the decision by her father, slumped in the booth, her smirk gone. "Work here," she muttered, disbelief warring with the dawning realization of her accountability. Her friends groaned, their panic peaking, but the die was cast. The sapphire table stood at a new threshold, its culture elevated by Tanya's choice. The inspectors prepared to submit their review, their notes a testament to a diner that had transformed adversity into opportunity. Tanya, at home, traced the stain on her uniform, a quiet pride replacing her earlier doubt. Sandra's world, once insulated by privilege, now faced a humbling reckoning, her untouchability a fading mirage. And within the diner, the staff readied for the days ahead, the Michelin star a possibility born from dignity's quiet power. The world watched on, the narrative shifting from outrage to redemption, as the sapphire table story continued to unfold. The clock ticked toward 9:35 p.m. West Africa time on Monday, October 20th, 2025, as the night deepened outside the sapphire table, its windows glowing warmly against the dark streets. The diner's air still thrummed with the weight of the day's events, the manager's earlier declaration, "It's about respect, and you've shown none," now a distant echo overshadowed by Tanya's choice of restorative justice. The online storm had quieted into a steady hum of anticipation, the world awaiting the next chapter of the saga that had thrust the humble establishment into the global spotlight. Inside, the kitchen staff moved with a renewed sense of purpose, their late-night efforts bolstered by the Michelin inspector's praise and the promise of a star. Tanya, at home, rested with Mia, her resolve strengthened by her sister's words, while Sandra and her friends faced the crumbling remnants of their untouchable facade. The following morning, under the soft light of a new day, a formal restitution agreement was enacted. Sandra Anderson, Suzanne Shannon, Fran Singleton, and Robin Skinner arrived at the sapphire table, their bright dresses replaced by plain aprons, their expressions a mix of defiance and dread. As part of the deal brokered by their families and overseen by the manager, they were required to perform community service at the diner for a week. The agreement, a direct result of Tanya's dignified choice, aimed to teach them humility through the very environment they had mocked. The regulars watched from their booths, their gazes a blend of curiosity and satisfaction, while the kitchen staff exchanged knowing nods, the chef's spatula tapping a quiet rhythm against the counter. The role reversal was stark. Where Sandra had once lounged in the window booth, laughing as she filmed Tanya's humiliation, she now stood behind the counter, an apron tied awkwardly around her waist. The pink dress was gone, replaced by the utilitarian white fabric that mirrored Tanya's own, now stained from yesterday's ordeal. She fumbled with a notepad, her manicured nails ill-suited for the task as she took an order from a regular, a grizzled trucker who raised an eyebrow but said nothing. Suzanne wiped tables with a grimace, her yellow dress a memory as she scrubbed at a stubborn spill, while Fran and Robin moved hesitantly, collecting dirty plates with downcast eyes. The diner, once a stage for their arrogance, had become a classroom for their humbling. Tanya, appointed as their supervisor by the manager, moved among them with the same quiet grace that had defined her through the crisis. Her stained uniform, now a badge of honor, contrasted with their pristine aprons, a visual testament to the shift in power. She assigned tasks with a steady voice, her eyes meeting Sandra's briefly as she handed her a tray of coffee mugs. "Start with table 5, she said, her tone neutral but firm. Sandra hesitated, her smirk faltering as she took the tray, her hands trembling slightly under Tanya's gaze. Each task chipped away at her arrogance. Carrying heavy plates, mopping spills, enduring the sidelong glances of the regulars. The weight of the apron, the ache in her arms, the quiet judgment in the air, all eroded the bubble of privilege she'd once inhabited. Their interactions were sparse but heavy with meaning. As Sandra struggled to balance a tray, Tanya stepped forward, adjusting it with a gentle hand. "Like this," she murmured, her voice soft but carrying the weight of experience. Sandra met her eyes, a flicker of shame crossing her face before she looked away, nodding silently. The moment passed, but it lingered, a bridge between their worlds. Later, as Sandra wiped down a booth, the very one where she'd once laughed, Tanya paused beside her, handing her a clean rag. "It gets easier," she said, her words a quiet olive branch. Sandra's response was a mumbled thanks, her voice barely audible, the arrogance draining with each menial chore. The diner watched, the regulars' murmurs softening into approval, the kitchen staff nodding in silent acknowledgement of the transformation unfolding. By midday, the strain showed on Sandra's face. She spilled a pitcher of water, the liquid pooling on the floor, and for a moment the old defiance flared. "This is ridiculous," she muttered, her friends echoing her frustration as they scrubbed nearby. But Tanya's calm presence steadied the room. "Mistakes happen," she said, handing Sandra a mop. "Keep going." The simplicity of the instruction, delivered without judgment, struck Sandra harder than any reprimand. She bent to the task, her movements slow but deliberate, the act of cleaning her own mess a mirror to her past behavior. Suzanne, Fran, and Robin followed suit, their initial resistance giving way to a grudging acceptance, their bright dresses a distant memory as they adapted to the apron's humility. The week progressed with a rhythm of quiet lessons. Sandra learned to pour coffee without spilling, her hands steadying with practice, while Suzanne mastered table settings, her whispers of complaint fading. Fran and Robin, once quick to laugh, now offered tentative smiles to customers, their actions a slow unraveling of their former selves. Tanya supervised with a watchful eye, her dignity a constant guide. Each evening, as the diner closed, the 4 teens lingered, their exhaustion a shared bond, their interactions with Tanya growing less strained. "You're doing better," Tanya said one night, stacking chairs as Sandra swept. The compliment hung between them, a rare acknowledgement that softened Sandra's guarded expression. The regulars took note, their initial wariness turning to cautious approval. An older woman left a tip with a nod to Sandra, while the trucker offered a gruff "good job" as he departed. The kitchen staff, peeking from the pass-through, murmured praise, the chef's rare grin a sign of progress. The Michelin inspectors, though absent, loomed in the background, their review a silent motivator. The diner, once a battleground, became a space of redemption, its warm tones a canvas for the teens' humbling journey. As the week neared its end, Sandra approached Tanya during a quiet moment, her apron smudged with the day's work. I didn't get it before," she said, her voice low, her eyes avoiding Tanya's. "I'm sorry." The apology was simple, unpolished, but genuine, a crack in the armor of her former self. Tanya nodded, her expression calm but warm. "It's a start," she replied, the words carrying the weight of forgiveness. The interaction, quiet and heavy, marked a turning point, the diner's atmosphere shifting with the promise of change. The sapphire table stood transformed, its culture enriched by the week's trials. The world, still watching through the lens of social media, began to share stories of redemption. The hashtag Sapphire Table Justice hashtag evolving into a narrative of growth. Tanya's choice had set a course, and Sandra's humbling journey was its first step. Subscribe if you believe people can change when they're forced to face their reflection. The clock edged toward 9:15 p.m. West Africa time on Monday, October 20th, 2025, as the night settled over the sapphire table, its windows casting a warm golden glow against the darkened streets. The diner's air, once thick with tension, now hummed with a quiet anticipation, the echoes of the past week's transformative events lingering like a soft melody. Tanya's choice of restorative justice had reshaped the space, turning Sandra and her friends' community service into a journey of humility, while the world watched through the ever-present lens of social media. The kitchen staff moved with a renewed vigor, their efforts bolstered by the promise of a Michelin review, and the regulars settled into their booths with a sense of pride. The stain on Tanya's uniform, now a symbol of resilience, had become a thread in the diner's evolving story. The next afternoon, the Michelin inspectors returned, their presence a quiet herald of change. The man with wire-rimmed glasses stepped into the back room, where the manager and staff had gathered, the leather portfolio in his hands a weighty promise. The woman beside him smiled faintly, her sharp gaze softening as she addressed the room. After careful consideration, she began, her voice steady. The sapphire table has earned its first Michelin star. A collective gasp rippled through the staff, followed by a burst of applause. The inspector continued, "This recognition is not just for your cuisine but for the culture of dignity and resilience you've demonstrated," exemplified by Tanya Solomon. The manager's face broke into a broad grin, the chef clapped a hand on his shoulder, and the waitstaff exchanged joyful glances, their late-night preparations validated by the prestigious honor. In the wake of the verdict, Tanya was promoted to floor supervisor, a role that elevated her from the quiet waitress to a leader within the diner. The manager announced the decision with a nod of respect, handing her a new apron embroidered with her name. "You've earned this," he said, his voice warm. Additionally, a scholarship fund was created in her name, seeded by contributions from the diner's regulars and a portion of the restitution from Sandra's family. The fund, dubbed the Tanya Solomon Dignity Scholarship, aimed to support students like Mia, ensuring Tanya's quiet strength would inspire others. She accepted the honor with a humble smile, her eyes glistening as she traced the embroidery, the stain on her old uniform now a relic of her rise. That evening, the restaurant hosted a small celebration, the diner transformed with strings of fairy lights and tables adorned with flowers from the regulars. The air filled with the aroma of freshly baked bread and the soft hum of conversation, a stark contrast to the tension of the previous week. Tanya moved among the guests, her new role evident in her confident stride, though her thoughts drifted inward. She paused by the window booth, once Sandra's throne of arrogance, reflecting on how a moment meant to humiliate her had turned into her ascent. The stain, the spill, the laughter, it had all been a crucible, forging her into a symbol of dignity. Mia joined her, squeezing her hand, and Tanya smiled, the weight of her journey settling into a quiet pride. As the celebration wound down, Sandra approached, her final shift drawing to a close. Her apron was smudged with a week's labor, her bright pink dress a distant memory replaced by a humble demeanor. She stopped before Tanya, her eyes downcast, her voice a mumble. I'm sorry," she said, the words halting but heartfelt. "For everything." The apology hung in the air, raw and unpolished, a culmination of her week of reflection. Tanya met her gaze, her expression calm but powerful, a nod acknowledging the sincerity without weakness. The interaction was brief, yet it carried the weight of reconciliation, the diner's atmosphere shifting with the promise of redemption. The celebration continued, the Michelin star a gleaming beacon above the diner, its light reflecting the resilience within. The regulars raised their cups in a toast to Tanya, the kitchen staff shared stories of the week's trials, and the manager hung a framed certificate on the wall, a testament to their triumph. Outside, the online narrative evolved, posts celebrating the star and Tanya's rise mingling with praise for Sandra's apology, the hashtag Sapphire Table Justice hashtag now a story of transformation. The world watched, its judgment softened by the diner's example. As the night deepened, the final narration whispered through the diner's warmth, "Respect isn't expensive. It's a currency freely given, nurtured in kindness and dignity. But once you lose it, it's hard to buy it back." A lesson etched in the week's events, from the spill to the star. Tanya stood by the door, her new apron a symbol of her ascent, her sister beside her, as the last guests departed. The sapphire table had risen, its culture enriched by the trials it had faced, its star a light born from the quiet power of respect. If you believe in equality, dignity, and second chances, subscribe and share this story.
Thank you for watching this story to the end. If you enjoyed this story, you will surely love the next one. It's as crazier and more intriguing as you can ever imagine. So do check it out. Click on the image showing on your screen right now to watch the next one.